Yes, come on up.
I'm hoping I can describe this.
Oh, I have the same feeling all the time.
So I'm pretty familiar with silence. That's the word I'll use.
Okay.
And I often can I drop through is the way I would say it. I drop through to silence. Like if something, I'm just aware of the silence. And when things come up or something happens, I can drop through. In fact, a lot of times I can't, it's almost hard to stay with, like if an emotion comes up and it's strong, if I stay with it for a short time, I drop through into silence.
Okay.
But I've noticed, so that seems great. I mean, it's very easy and very few things seem to bother me for very long.
Yeah.
So, but I notice that there are still ways that I get hooked, that I am reactive in a moment, and I see blind spots. Mm-hmm. And I'm having trouble figuring out, I've been dropping through for quite a while.
Yeah.
And yet those blind spots are still there.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering about staying, like if I should be turning back and looking a little bit more.
Like that. There are certain things that just, what you're calling dropping through won't resolve. Certain things it will, but the deeper sort of karmic patterns, it won't. You can drop through, or you can witness, or you can whatever, and it will keep kind of going through the system, but it recycles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it recycles enough times, and then something goes, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And that's why you're asking me the question, I imagine.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad that you are. And when that's the case, yes, then that which continues to recycle, that's worthy of looking at, because that's catching consciousness and dragging it back into a dream state. Mm-hmm. And so those kind of catches, it's not necessarily good enough just to watch them, right? Mm-hmm. They are formed by patterns of belief and assumption. Mm-hmm. And it's important to look at them and to see what you're actually experiencing is a mostly unconscious belief, right? Mm-hmm. Something that's believed, right? Not by the silence, but just by the conditioned mind. Something that's believed. And because if it wasn't believed, it wouldn't be happening. That's how you know.
Yeah.
Right. So you start to. So it's very important then to look at those particular areas, and to see what's being believed. Mm-hmm. What's the worldview here? Mm-hmm. How does this piece of conditioning see things? What's the belief? What's the structure that's holding it together?
That makes sense.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. And because I was having, sometimes I think, well, if I turn towards it, then I'm becoming fascinated with it, is a word that you've used.
Yeah.
And maybe it's instead
means you're indulging in it.
Right, but maybe instead going more into the investigation of really finding the belief in there.
It's a great place to ask the question, right? Mm-hmm. Of what's the belief? And you'll find it's very simple. This isn't a complicated pattern of analysis that we're talking about here, right? It's not about finding the psychological underpinnings of everything and and whatever. That's not necessarily what I'm speaking about. It's something very immediate, very in the moment, in this instant, in this moment. There is a belief pattern, and that's what's recycling. Something is believed. that's out of harmony with what is.
That makes sense. 'Cause
And
I
your
feel
system, and your system is showing you that.
yeah.
As
And
I
the
say, we're all hooked
simplicity.
up.
Yeah. The simplicity seems like an important part of it, because it
Very.
seems like going back into the psychological stuff does not feel helpful to
No,
me.
it's not necessarily helpful here. That's why I say, I was speaking last night, so when you can get, where I talked about condensing things, getting them very, very clear. When I'm talking about that, you can ultimately condense any piece of conditioning down to a single short, one-sentence statement of belief. Once you've looked at it that closely and got it down to one thing, one belief, one statement, one judgment, right? One condemnation, one argument with what is, then you've distilled it down to what's actually happening.
And in that moment, I can see I almost still have the same question at that moment, because at that belief, it's almost like I still don't know what to do with it. I can just go to that belief and then drop through to the silence again.
No, don't drop through to the silence.
Yeah, it seems like there's something else that needs to happen there with that belief.
Right. That belief has to let go. It has to see through itself.
Yeah.
It's one thing to see the belief, right? But just because you see it doesn't mean that you're going to see that it has no truth.
Right.
But it's not you out here, you see, because that's the part, if you get conscious enough, there's a part of consciousness that knows that's not true, but that's not the part that counts.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the belief, it's right in there, that's what has to realize it's not true. Then it lets go of itself. So that's the focus of staying right with that, right? Is this true? Right. Byron Katie would ask you to ask yourself, can I know that this is true? And you zero in on it, and you just stay right there. And you know when you don't need to do it anymore, because it will just sort of pop like a bubble. That's when that belief pattern knows that it itself isn't true. It just kind of pops like, poof. Ah. You get the feeling?
Yes, I do.
Give it a try, and write me a note and tell me how it goes.
Okay.
Will you?
Yeah,
if you're so
I will.
inclined.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I'll be quite honest with you. You know, in the past, if you'd come up three years ago, I probably would have done all this with you at the microphone. And it may or may not have worked, and it's a great show, and everybody likes it. Or if they've seen it enough times, then they get horrendously bored with it. But I don't do that so often now with people, because what I've started to realize is each of us, there's a time for that. I understand that. But each of us also has to come in and realize that we each have the capacity to look for ourselves in ourselves, right? That we don't actually need to be dependent on forces outside of ourselves. And that's why I don't ever walk everybody through every step, because it's really important that people learn how to walk themselves through. Because then the keys are in your hands. They're not in my hands, right? And you realize, wow, this isn't actually so difficult. The difficulty is just maintaining the focus and the simplicity and the non-complexity. You know? I had a student a long time ago, someone who's now teaching, and she had a similar sort of thing that reoccurred and reoccurred and reoccurred and reoccurred and reoccurred. And I just said, okay, what's the belief? And she found the belief, not, she got it all distilled down, 100 beliefs can distill down into one central one. She found the central belief, and I said, just ask, is it true? And stay with it, and stay with it, and stay with it, and stay with it. And it just unfolded, right? And it just through asking, is it true? Everything that needed to be seen was seen. It was quite a ride, because its retreats back then were 40 people, and she reported every day in satsang. So at one point it was like the belief was seen, oh, that belief came when I was 8 years old. And then it was, oh, when I was 3 years old. And then it was, oh, when I first learned, and oh, no, oh, there's a past life there, and it came from there, and it came from that one, and it came, and it just like tuk tuk tuk, like these dominoes going backwards, right? Until finally it just sort of got to its actual origination, and then it was actually seen. Oh, it was just it was a misinterpretation of an event. That's how all these beliefs get started. Something happens, and then our minds misinterpret it. Boom, the belief is solidified. And you just look at it, just sustain it until it opens. Yeah. And the least complicated, the better. Come on up. You know, it's actually just another version of asking, who am I? That's questioning the belief, isn't it? The belief is in me. And questioning, what is this me? It's the same process. You can just use that process through anything. Anything you get hooked on, you can question it until it pops like a bubble.